The morning sun rose over the endless green fields of Kepler 442b, painting the sky in soft purple and gold. Elder Cathara stood on the observation deck of the colony's main building, watching the farmers begin their daily work. The blue-skinned Rylani moved slowly through the crops, their gentle hands checking each plant with care. This world had been their home for 300 years. The Rylani had turned the empty planet into a garden that fed 17 different star systems. They grew food that could keep any species alive and healthy. Their crops never failed, their soil never died, and their harvest always came on time. Cathara smiled as she watched the children run between the rows of tall grain. The young ones laughed as they chased small flying creatures that looked like tiny rainbows. Everything was peaceful here. Everything was safe. "Elder," called a voice behind her. Captain Velthorn entered the room, his uniform clean and simple. As head of the colony's peacekeeping force, he carried only a stunning weapon that could make troublemakers sleep for a few hours. Real violence was something the Rylani had forgotten long ago. "Good morning, Captain," Cathara said. "Another beautiful day to tend our world." Velthorn nodded, but his face looked worried. "Elder, we have received some strange readings from our deep space sensors. There are ships moving toward our system." "Many ships." Cathara turned from the window. In all her years as leader, traders and visitors always announced themselves well in advance. The Rylani reputation for hospitality was known across the galaxy. Perhaps they are merchants who lost their communication equipment, or maybe refugees seeking food and shelter. "The sensor readings show vessels much larger than any trade ship I have seen," Velthorn said. "They are still 3 days away, but their formation suggests military organization." The elder frowned. Military ships were rare in this part of space. Most species settled their differences with words, not weapons. "Send them a message of welcome. Tell them our docking bays are open and our tables are ready. If they need supplies, we will gladly share." Captain Velthorn bowed his head. "I will send the message immediately, Elder." As Velthorn left to handle communications, Cathara returned to watching her people work. The farmers loaded hover carts with fresh vegetables. Children helped their parents gather fruits from the tall trees. Everything looked normal and peaceful, but deep in space, the approaching ships did not respond to messages of welcome. 3 days passed. The ships grew closer and larger on the sensor screens. Captain Velthorn checked the readings again and again, hoping he had made a mistake. But the numbers did not lie. 37 massive vessels approached Kepler 442b, each one armed with enough weapons to destroy a small moon. "Elder," Velthorn said when he found Cathara in the colony's central garden, "the approaching fleet has finally responded to our messages." "What do they say?" Cathara asked, kneeling beside a patch of blue flowers that bloomed only on this world. "They identify themselves as the Gavari Dominion. They demand immediate surrender of this colony and all its inhabitants." Cathara stood slowly, dirt still on her hands from tending the flowers. "Surrender? But we have done nothing wrong. We are farmers, not warriors. What could they possibly want with us? The message says our world sits on an important trade route. They claim this system now belongs to their empire. They give us 48 hours to prepare for their arrival." The elder felt something cold move through her body. She had heard stories of the Gavari Dominion from travelers and traders. They were a species that took what they wanted by force. They turned peaceful worlds into slave camps and mining operations. They showed no mercy to those who resisted. "How many people can our evacuation shuttles carry?" she asked. "Perhaps 100 if we remove all cargo and safety equipment," Velthorn replied. "But Elder, we have 12,000 colonists on this world." Cathara closed her eyes. The Rylani had always believed that kindness and peace would protect them. They had no warships, no battle armor, no weapons designed to kill. Their stunning weapons could barely stop a single attacker, let alone an army. "Send messages to every species we know," she ordered. "Tell them what is happening here. Ask for help. Someone in the galaxy must care enough to aid us." Captain Velthorn saluted and hurried away. Cathara remained in the garden, looking at the flowers that might soon be trampled under the boots of invaders. She thought of the children who played in the fields, the elders who remembered their homeworld, the families who had built their lives on this peaceful planet. Over the next day, responses came from across the galaxy. The Zenthari Council sent messages of sympathy, but explained they could not risk war with the Gavari. The Meklon Federation offered to negotiate for the release of some prisoners after the conquest was complete. The crystalline collective promised to remember the Rilani in their songs. Each message said the same thing in different words. They were sorry, but they would not help. As the second day ended, Kethera stood again on the observation deck. The Gavri fleet had arrived in orbit around their world. The massive ships blocked out the stars, casting dark shadows on the surface below. Soon, the farmers would hide in underground shelters. Soon, everything they had built would be destroyed or stolen. But Kethera remembered something her grandfather had told her long ago. In the old archives, there was an emergency beacon that had not been used for 200 years. It was connected to a species that most had forgotten about, a small world on the edge of known space. With trembling hands, she activated the ancient device. The beacon sent its signal across the darkness between stars, reaching toward a blue planet where a young species had recently learned to travel among the stars. The response came faster than she had dared to hope. A simple message in perfect Rilani language. Message received. Maintain position. Help is coming. Kethera did not know what kind of help a small unknown species could provide against the mighty Gavari Dominion, but for the first time in 2 days she felt something other than despair. Outside, the dark ships waited in orbit like hungry predators. But somewhere in the vast darkness of space, someone was coming to help. War Commander Thekmor stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the green world below. His gray skin showed the scars of many battles, and his forearms moved with the practiced ease of a veteran warrior. The Gavari had conquered 43 worlds under his command, and this small farming colony would be number 44. Open communication channels to the planet's surface, he ordered. His voice was deep and harsh like grinding stone. The blue-skinned farmers below would learn what all conquered species learned. The Gavari Dominion took what it wanted, when it wanted it. Resistance only made the conquest more painful. Thekmor activated the planetary broadcast system. His image would now appear on every communication device across the colony. Inhabitants of this world, I am War Commander Thekmor of the Gavari Dominion. Your planet now belongs to our empire. On the surface, Elder Kethera and Captain Velthorn watched the transmission from the colony's command center. The alien commander was tall and muscular, covered in battle armor that looked like it could stop any weapon the Rilani possessed. You have 2 choices, Thekmor continued. Submit to immediate enslavement and become workers in our mining operations, or face complete destruction. You have 6 hours to decide. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. Choose wisely. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in silence. Captain Velthorn stared at the blank screen, his hands shaking. Elder, our stunning weapons cannot pierce that armor. Our shields cannot stop their orbital cannons. We have no way to fight them. Kethera felt the weight of 12,000 lives pressing on her shoulders. How many shuttles do we have that can reach space? 7 small cargo shuttles, Velthorn replied. If we remove all equipment and pack people tightly, perhaps 90 colonists could escape to the outer system. But where would they go? The Gavari will hunt down any survivors. The elder walked to the window and looked out at the fields where her people still worked, pretending that normal life could continue. Children played near their homes while their parents whispered in worried voices. Everyone knew the ships overhead meant death or slavery. Begin evacuation procedures for the children and elders, she ordered. If only a few can escape, let it be those who have lived the least and those who have given the most. Captain Velthorn nodded and began sending orders to his small security force. They would load the shuttles in secret and launch them toward the edge of the system. Maybe the refugees could hide among the asteroids until the Gavari left. Hours passed slowly. Reports came from around the colony as families said goodbye to loved ones who would stay behind. Parents kissed their children and told them to be brave. Elders blessed the young families who would remain to face whatever came next. In orbit, War Commander Thekmor grew impatient. The 6-hour deadline was only a test. He would attack regardless of what the farmers chose. Conquered species always fought better when they thought they had a chance to surrender peacefully. Weapons officer, he called to one of his subordinates. Fire a warning shot at an empty section of farmland. Let them see what our cannons can do. A beam of energy lanced down from the flagship, striking a field of golden grain. The blast turned everything in a mile-wide circle into melted glass and smoke. The shock wave shattered windows in nearby buildings and knocked Rilani to the ground. Kethera felt the explosion through the soles of her feet. When she looked toward the blast site, she saw a perfectly round crater where food for thousands of people had grown that morning. The message was clear. This was what awaited anyone who resisted. "Elder," Captain Velthorn said, rushing into the room, "our deep space monitors have detected something strange. Multiple contacts are moving through the outer system at high speed. The signatures do not match any known Gavari vessel." "More invaders?" Kethara asked, her heart sinking even further. "Unknown. The ships are running silent except for brief engine burns. They appear to be moving toward our position, but they are still several hours away." Thekmor also noticed the approaching vessels on his sensor screens. He studied the readings with experienced eyes. The ships were smaller than his cruisers and moved in formations he did not recognize. Probably scavengers hoping to claim salvage after the conquest. "Ignore them," he told his officers. "A few pirate ships cannot threaten this fleet. When we finish with the planet, we will destroy them as well." The war commander had good reason for confidence. His 37 ships carried enough firepower to crack a moon in half. Each vessel was armored to survive direct hits from the largest known weapons. His warriors had never lost a battle, never retreated from an enemy, never shown mercy to the weak. On the planet below, the evacuation shuttles launched under cover of darkness. 7 small ships rose toward the stars, carrying less than 100 survivors toward an uncertain future. Those who remained gathered in underground shelters and prepared to face their fate. Elder Kethara made her way to the deepest shelter, where the colony's children waited with their remaining parents. The young ones asked questions she could not answer. Why were the bad ships here? Where were the children who left on the shuttles going? When would everything go back to normal? "Will anyone come to help us?" asked a small girl with bright blue eyes. Kethara knelt beside the child and took her tiny hands. "I sent a message to friends far away. Sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places." The child smiled, trusting completely in the wisdom of elders. Around them, other families huddled together in the dim light of emergency power. They had built their colony with love and patience over 3 centuries. Now they could only wait and hope that their end would be swift. Above ground, Captain Velthorn remained at his post in the command center. His instruments showed the approaching ships drawing closer to the system's edge. Their formation was tight and disciplined, nothing like the chaotic movements of pirates or scavengers. A new signal reached the colony's communication array. The transmission was in perfect Rilani language, but the voice was unlike any species Velthorn had heard before. It sounded young and determined, with an edge of controlled anger. "This is Colonel Taman of the Terran Defense Corps," the voice said. "All civilians remain in underground shelters. Combat operations begin in 60 minutes. Velthorn stared at the communication console. He had never heard of the Terran Defense Corps or any species called Terrans, but something in that voice made him believe that help had finally arrived. In orbit, War Commander Thekmor prepared to begin the final assault on the helpless world below, unaware that his perfect record was about to end. War Commander Thekmor walked the corridors of his flagship, inspecting battle preparations. His armor clanked with each step, and junior officers quickly moved out of his way. The 6-hour deadline had passed, and the foolish farmers below had not responded to his ultimatum. "Status report," he demanded as he entered the weapons control room. "All orbital cannons charged and ready." "War Commander," replied his weapons officer. "Ground assault forces are loaded in dropships. The planet will be ours within 4 hours." Thekmor nodded with satisfaction. This conquest would proceed like all the others. First, orbital bombardment would destroy any resistance. Then ground forces would land to secure valuable resources and round up survivors for the slave camps. By tomorrow, this green world would be another trophy for the Dominion. But something nagged at his warrior instincts. The approaching ships in the outer system bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Scavengers and pirates usually waited until after a battle to claim their scraps. These vessels moved with purpose, closing distance despite facing overwhelming odds. "Have we identified those incoming ships?" he asked. "Negative, War Commander. They refuse to respond to our communications. Sensor readings show 12 vessels of unknown design. Much smaller than our cruisers, but they maintain tight formation." Thekmor's scarred face twisted into a cruel smile. 12 ships against 37. Perhaps these fools wish to die gloriously in battle. We will grant their wish after we finish with the planet. Deep underground, Elder Kethara moved through the shelter tunnels, checking on her people. Families huddled together in small chambers carved from the living rock. The air recycling systems hummed quietly. providing clean air for the thousands of Rilani who waited in the darkness. She found Captain Velthorn in the communications center, listening to radio chatter from the surface. Reports came from the few guards who remained at monitoring stations tracking the movements of ships in space. "Any word from our mysterious friends?" Kethera asked. "They maintain communication silence," Velthorn replied. "But their formation has changed. The 12 ships have split into 3 groups of 4. They approach from different directions." Kethara studied the tactical display with eyes that had never needed to understand military movements. "Is that good or bad for us?" "I do not know," Velthorn admitted. "Our people have never been warriors. But the formation suggests they plan to attack the Gavari fleet from multiple angles." The elder felt a chill run through her body. 12 ships against 37 seemed like suicide. Even if these mysterious Terrans meant to help, they would die uselessly in the cold vacuum of space. More innocent lives would be lost because she had sent that desperate message. Above ground, the few Rilani guards who remained at their posts watched the sky with growing fear. The Gavari ships hung in orbit like dark clouds blocking out familiar stars. Occasionally, one of the massive vessels would fire at an empty section of farmland, turning crops and soil into glass craters. Each blast reminded the defenders how helpless they were. Guard Yelnara crouched in a hidden observation post, reporting ship movements to the underground command center. Through her scope, she could see Gavari dropships beginning to launch from the larger vessels. Soon enemy soldiers would land on the surface to begin the occupation. "Captain Velthorn," she whispered into her communicator, "the invasion has begun. I count 40 dropships heading for the main population centers." In the command center below, Velthorn received the report with a heavy heart. "Understood. All surface guards fall back to the shelters immediately. Do not attempt to fight the landing forces." The order felt like surrender, but Velthorn knew his people had no choice. Their stunning weapons might stop 1 or 2 invaders, but 40 shiploads of warriors would crush any resistance in minutes. Yelnara was about to abandon her post when something caught her eye. New contacts appeared on her scope, moving fast through the upper atmosphere. These ships were different from the Gavari dropships. They were smaller, sleeker, and moved with incredible speed. "Captain," she called urgently, "unknown aircraft have entered our atmosphere. They appear to be intercepting the Gavari landing forces." In space, Colonel Taman sat in the command chair of the Terran Defense Corps destroyer Soul's Pride. Around him, his bridge crew worked with calm efficiency, preparing for the most important battle of their careers. Through the main screen, he could see the Gavari fleet spread across local space like a cancer. "All ships report ready." "Colonel," announced his communications officer. "Lieutenant Subin, enemy positions confirmed," added the weapons officer, Ensign Do-hyun. 37 heavy cruisers, standard Gavari formation. They have superior numbers and firepower. Taemin studied the tactical display with the eyes of a man who had fought in 12 major battles. The Gavari were strong and well-armed, but they fought like conquerors, not defenders. They expected easy victory against helpless farmers. "They have never faced humans in battle," he said quietly. "They do not know what desperation can accomplish." "Begin the attack." The human fleet moved like a pack of hunting wolves. The first group of ships approached from the system's sun side, using the star's radiation to mask their energy signatures. The second group came from behind the planet's largest moon, staying hidden until the last possible moment. The third group made a direct approach, drawing the enemy's attention. War Commander Tekmor watched the approaching vessels with growing interest. The unknown ships moved faster than any craft he had seen before. Their formation changes were quick and precise, suggesting experienced commanders. "All ships prepare to engage the incoming hostiles," he ordered. "Destroy them quickly so we can return to the planetary conquest." But as his fleet turned to face the approaching enemies, Tekmor began to understand that he had made a terrible mistake. These were not pirates or scavengers. The way they moved, the way they split their forces, the way they seemed to know exactly where his weak points were located. These were warriors. On the planet's surface, Yelnara watched in amazement as the mysterious aircraft engaged the Gavari dropships in the sky above. The unknown fighters were tiny compared to the massive landing craft, but they moved like flying daggers, striking with deadly precision. "Captain Velthorn," she reported, her voice filled with wonder, "the unknown forces are engaging Gavari ground units. They fight like nothing I have ever seen." In the depths of the shelter, Elder Kithara listened to the reports with growing hope. Someone had answered her desperate call for help. Someone cared enough to fight for strangers on a distant world. But the battle was just beginning and the outcome remained uncertain. In the darkness between stars, human and Gavari forces prepared to test their strength against each other for the first time in galactic history. The space around Kepler 442b erupted into violence as the human fleet struck like lightning from 3 directions. Colonel Taemin watched from his command chair as his ships tore into the Gavari formation with deadly precision. "First contact in 5 seconds," announced Lieutenant Subin from her weapons station. "Enemy vessels are turning to engage." The Soul's Pride shuddered as its railguns fired their first salvo. Metal slugs accelerated to incredible speeds, punched through Gavari shields like paper. The targeted cruiser spun helplessly as atmosphere vented from its ruptured hull. War Commander Thekmor stood frozen on his flagship's bridge as alarms screamed around him. His sensors showed damage reports from 6 ships in the first exchange of fire. That should have been impossible. Gavari shields had never failed so quickly against any enemy weapon. "Return fire," he roared. "All ships target the largest enemy vessel." Energy beams lanced across space toward the human destroyer. But the Soul's Pride was already moving. Captain Hansol, the ship's pilot, threw the vessel into a spiraling dive that carried it between 2 Gavari cruisers. The enemy beams struck each other instead of their intended target. "Impossible," Thekmor whispered. "No ship that large should be able to change direction so quickly." The battle raged across the star system as 12 human ships danced between 37 Gavari cruisers. The humans were outnumbered and outgunned, but they fought with a fury that shocked their enemies. Every movement was calculated, every shot placed with surgical precision. Ensign Do-hyun coordinated the attack on the destroyer's port side, his fingers flying over weapon controls. "Target their engine sections," he called to the other gunners. Disabled ships cannot retreat to warn the Dominion. On the surface of Kepler 442b, the ground battle began as Gavari dropships descended through the atmosphere. The massive landing craft carried hundreds of warriors in powered armor. Expecting to face farmers with simple tools, instead, they met human Marines who had been waiting in the shadows. Lieutenant Subin led Alpha Squad from their concealed positions near the main colony. Her team of 8 Marines had been on the ground for only 20 minutes, but they had already turned the landing zone into a maze of hidden traps and ambush points. "Contact, 200 meters," whispered Sergeant Wu Jin through the squad radio. 40 Gavari infantry advancing toward the settlement. Subin checked her rifle and signaled her team to spread out. The Gavari were larger and stronger than humans, protected by armor that could stop most conventional weapons. But the Marines had studied their enemy during the approach, learning weaknesses that could be exploited. "Wait for them to enter the kill zone," Subin ordered. "Remember, we are not here to win a fair fight. We are here to protect civilians." The Gavari warriors advanced in standard formation, confident in their superior firepower. They had conquered dozens of worlds using the same tactics. Heavy weapons would suppress any resistance while infantry secured key positions. But as they moved between the abandoned buildings, human weapons fire erupted from every direction. Bullets designed to penetrate armor found gaps between plates. Explosives hidden in doorways caught entire squads in deadly traps. Private Do-hyun crawled through a drainage tunnel beneath the colony's main street. His mission was to reach a group of Rilani children trapped in a collapsed shelter while enemy forces advanced overhead. He could hear the footsteps of Gavari warriors passing directly above him. "This is Bravo 3, he whispered into his radio, approaching the trapped civilians. "I count 6 children and 2 adults in the basement of the medical center." "Copy Bravo 3, replied Lieutenant Subin. "We will hold the perimeter. Get those kids out of there." Do-hyun emerged from the tunnel into the building's basement, where 7 terrified Rilani huddled in the corner. The children looked at his strange armor and alien face with wide eyes, but the adults seemed to understand that help had finally arrived. "I am here to help," Do-hyun said in simple Rilani words he had learned during the journey to this world. "Follow me to safety." Above ground, the battle intensified as more Gavari forces landed. The aliens had overwhelming numbers, but they could not understand why their conquest was taking so long. Every building became a fortress. Every street became a killing field. The small human force seemed to be everywhere at once. Captain Velthorn watched the surface battle from his underground command center, amazed by what he saw on the monitoring screens. The human warriors moved like ghosts through the colony, appearing to strike at enemy forces and then vanishing before retaliation could arrive. How many Marines did they send? Elder Cathara asked as she studied the tactical displays. Our sensors indicate approximately 200 human soldiers on the ground, Felthorn replied. They are facing more than 2,000 Gavari warriors. 200 against 2,000? Cathara stared at the numbers in disbelief. They will all die trying to save us. But the humans continued to fight with a determination that defied logic. Squad after squad held impossible positions, buying time for civilians to reach safety. Marines carried wounded Rilani to medical stations while enemy fire filled the air around them. In space, the ship battle reached its climax as human fighters swarmed through the Gavari fleet like angry insects. The small human craft were too fast and agile for the enemy's heavy weapons to track effectively. Pilot Youngsu dove his fighter between the support struts of a Gavari cruiser, firing plasma charges into vital systems. The enemy ship's power grid failed, leaving it dead in space. His wingman, Pilot Minho, used the distraction to attack the cruiser's weapon batteries, silencing its guns forever. War Commander Thekmor watched his perfect fleet being torn apart by an enemy he had never expected to face. Human ships burned in space alongside his own, but the damage ratio was all wrong. He was losing 3 vessels for every human ship destroyed. Order all units to retreat to the edge of the system, he commanded. We will regroup and call for reinforcements. But Colonel Taemin had anticipated this move. Human ships moved to block every escape route, their weapons continuing to find targets among the fleeing Gavari vessels. This is Colonel Taemin to all Gavari forces. His voice echoed across every communication channel. You came here to conquer peaceful farmers. Instead, you found warriors who fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. Surrender now or face complete destruction. Thekmor looked at his sensor readings and felt something he had never experienced before in battle. Fear. More than half his fleet was destroyed or disabled. The ground forces reported heavy casualties and no progress in securing the colony. For the first time in his career, the war commander considered surrender. On the planet below, Private Duhyun led the rescued Rilani children through the tunnel system toward safety. Behind him, the sounds of battle continued as his fellow Marines held the line against impossible odds. The children trusted him completely, following the strange alien warrior who had come from across the galaxy to protect them. Their faith gave him strength to continue fighting, even as exhaustion and pain made each step harder than the last. The storm of battle raged on, but its outcome was no longer in doubt. The last Gavari cruiser exploded in a flash of light that briefly outshone the system's star. Colonel Taemin watched from the bridge of Soul's Pride as debris scattered across space, marking the end of War Commander Thekmor's fleet. All enemy vessels destroyed or disabled. Colonel, reported Lieutenant Subin, her voice tired but victorious. No ships escaped to warn the Dominion. Taemin nodded, studying the damage reports from his own fleet. 7 human ships had been destroyed in the battle. More than half his Marines on the ground were wounded or dead. Victory always came with a price. Begin rescue operations for enemy survivors, he ordered, and prepare medical teams for the surface. Our people need help. On the planet below, the ground battle had ended in complete victory for the human forces. Gavari warriors who had expected easy conquest found themselves trapped between Marine squads and the planet's natural defenses. Those who survived the fighting surrendered to soldiers they could not understand. War Commander Thekmor sat in the ruins of his command bunker, blood trickling from wounds in his gray skin. His powered armor was cracked and useless, and his weapon lay broken beside him. Around him, the remains of his personal guard showed the price of challenging human Marines in close combat. Lieutenant Subin entered the bunker with her rifle ready, followed by 2 other Marines. She looked at the defeated alien commander with professional interest, noting the scars that marked him as a veteran of many battles. You are War Commander Thekmor, she said in the Gavari language. Human intelligence had provided basic translation programs for this mission. I am, Thekmor replied, his voice filled with pain and confusion. What species are you? In 43 conquests, I have never faced warriors like yours. Subin removed her helmet, revealing a young human face marked by exhaustion and determination. We are called humans. We come from a world called Earth. Why? Thekmor demanded. Why would you throw your lives away for strangers? The Rilani cannot pay you. They have no military alliance with your people. What do you gain by fighting us? The question hung in the air between them. Subin thought of the children Private Do-hyun had rescued, of the families hiding in underground shelters, of the farms that fed 17 star systems with food grown by gentle hands. Because they asked for help, she said simply. Deckmore stared at her as if she had spoken words in an unknown language. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered a species that fought without seeking profit or territory. The concept of helping strangers without reward was completely alien to him. Across the colony, human Marines worked alongside Rilani civilians to treat the wounded and repair damaged buildings. Private Do-hyun sat in the medical center, accepting treatment for burns on his arms while the children he had rescued played nearby. They had drawn pictures of him in bright colors, showing the strange warrior who had carried them to safety. Elder Cathara found him there, watching the children with tired eyes. "Private Do-hyun," she said, learning his name from the other Marines. "My people owe you a debt we can never repay." Do-hyun looked up at the blue-skinned elder, noting the kindness in her ancient eyes. "No debt," he said in broken Rilani. "Children safe. That is enough." Cathara felt tears run down her face as she realized the truth. These warriors had traveled across the galaxy, fought against impossible odds, and many had died, all because strangers needed help. It was a concept so pure and noble that it changed everything she thought she knew about the universe. Captain Velthorn approached Colonel Taman as the human commander surveyed the battlefield. The Rilani officer had never seen real war before today, and the experience had changed him in ways he was still discovering. "Colonel," Velthorn said, saluting in the human manner he had observed. "Why did your people answer our call? We are farmers, not warriors. We have nothing to offer in return for your sacrifice." Taman looked out at the fields where human and Rilani medics worked together to save lives. Some of the crops were damaged by battle, but most would survive to feed hungry people across the galaxy. The gardens would bloom again. "Long ago our people were helpless too," he said quietly. "We faced enemies we could not defeat, called for help that never came. We know what it feels like to wait in the darkness, hoping someone somewhere cares enough to answer. And now you answer for others," Velthorn observed. "Now we answer for others," Taman confirmed, "because no one should face that darkness alone." News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light, carried by quantum communication networks and traitor gossip. The story seemed impossible at first. A small human fleet had defeated the Gavari Dominion's most successful war commander. 200 Marines had stopped an invasion force of 2,000. Other peaceful species began to take notice of this new player in galactic affairs. The humans had not demanded territory or tribute after their victory. They had not established military bases or claimed mining rights. They had simply helped strangers and then offered friendship to anyone who wanted it. The Gavari Dominion itself received the news with shock and growing concern. Their expansion plans suddenly required careful reconsideration. Conquering helpless farmers was one thing, but those farmers might now have allies who fought like demons and asked nothing in return. Months later, Captain Velthorn stood on the observation deck of a human starship, looking out at the stars through eyes that had seen war and peace, destruction and hope. He wore the uniform of a Terran Naval Academy cadet, the first non-human officer to join Earth's defense forces. On Kepler 442b, Lieutenant Subin led a mixed unit of human Marines and Rilani volunteers through training exercises in the restored fields. The colony now had early warning systems and defensive positions, but more importantly, it had allies who would come when called. Private Do-hyun had remained on the planet for 6 months, helping to train local security forces and playing with the children he had rescued. When his tour ended, the kids gave him a garden they had planted in his honor. The flowers were blue and bright, blooming only on this distant world. Elder Cathara worked in her garden as the sun set over fields that had seen battle and survived. Human and Rilani children played together among the rows of growing plants, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. She thought often about Colonel Taemin's words. The humans had answered her call because they remembered being helpless, remembered waiting for help that never came. They had sworn that no one else should face that feeling alone. In the distance, she could see the memorial they had built for the human warriors who died defending her world. Names from Earth were carved in stone beside Rilani symbols of growth and peace. The two species had become family through shared struggle and sacrifice. The galaxy was changing. Word spread from system to system about the small blue planet, whose people fought for others without asking for reward. Other peaceful species began reaching out to Earth, not seeking protection, but offering friendship with beings who valued courage over profit. The Rilani continued to tend their gardens and feed the galaxy with crops grown by gentle hands. But they were no longer helpless farmers waiting for conquerors to arrive. They had learned that sometimes peace must be defended by those willing to fight for it. And somewhere among the stars, human ships patrolled the darkness, carrying a simple message to anyone who would listen. When peaceful people call for help, someone will answer. No one waits alone in the dark anymore. The universe had learned that humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology or tactics, but their refusal to abandon those in need. It was a lesson that would echo across the cosmos for generations to come, changing the very nature of how species related to each other among the stars. In her garden, Elder Cathara smiled as she watched the children play, knowing that her world was safe not because of weapons or walls, but because somewhere in the galaxy, warriors kept watch over those who chose to grow flowers instead of building bombs. The stars shone brighter now, filled with hope instead of fear,